So when we have to get rid of things, and when librarians past couldn't get rid of things, we sometimes just shoved them into any nook and cranny that we had lying around. And here is one nook and cranny that my manager will not thank me for showing you. It's our loft. There it is, where VHS tapes go to die. Oh, am I popping the mic? Sorry. I'm very short. So this is where I found our near complete collection of Punch. So the Punch is a very long running periodical, and we have almost all of it. And I think that's what saved it from the skip, that it was near complete. So it was sitting there dry and safe, but deaccessioned. Many of my colleagues have worked for the library for a very long time, so they remembered it going up there. They remembered who put it up there, who couldn't bear to throw it away. They also remembered that before it was deaccessioned, it was offered to our BA illustration department. They're like, hey guys, do you want this? You can have it, you can keep it in the studio. They're like, no, thanks. So that is where it went. That table, actually, that's where I found it. I knew it had potential when I was looking at it, and it would be so great to get this back out again, but I can't just whip it back out and shove it on the shelves. It had been shoved in the cupboard for a reason. So I had to have a really good think about what I could do with it. Just to backtrack a little bit, because Punch is very famous in Britain. I expect most of the Brits here are familiar with it or have it in their collection. I don't know how famous it is in Ireland and in North America, so I'll give you a little bit of history on it. Punch is an extremely long-running British satirical magazine. It was founded in 1841 and ran continuously for about 150 years. It really hit its peak in about 1940 and eventually folded first in 1992, and then it stumbled along briefly, being reinvigorated until it eventually died at length in 2002. At its height, it was read right the way across Britain, including by people like Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Its circulation figures were in the hundreds of thousands. This is important because although it's old and important, it's not especially rare or valuable. If you wanted to grab yourself an issue of Punch, they go for about €10 on eBay. You know, just for a bit of context. It was aimed at a conservative, middle class, and largely male readership, but it was considered so acceptable and so establishment. It was something that was read by a lot of people, and probably just like across the breakfast table. Papa just reading out all this editorial stuff to his adoring family. This makes it a surprisingly influential barometer of Victorian manners and morals, offering these very sharp reflections of social attitudes and political thought. So from a historical perspective, if you're a 19th century historian, Punch is an absolute goldmine to know what it was that middle class Victorians were like, what they were into, what they found amusing, what was important to them. Super valuable social history document. But I work in an art school. We don't have history students in that traditional sense. But one of Punch's most fruitful lenses is fashion. And this book on the left here, The Way to Wear 'Em by Christina Walkley, became a really useful little way in for me when I was starting to think about what I could do with this albatross in the loft. 19th century fashion was a regular target for Punch's ridicule. Satirical drawings are brilliant in any sort of fashion history context because they are one of the very, very few places you see fashion depicted at its worst. If you're looking at fashion magazines or portraiture, they're there to sell designs, flatter the wearer. It's only satire that shows fashion in a really ridiculous, silly, frivolous context. Today, we may consider some Victorian fashions as strange or oppressive, and if anything, Punch shows us that its male illustrators and readership thought exactly the same thing. They found women's fashions weird and silly, and Victorian women's fashions in particular were changing rapidly in this period, responding to shifting gender roles and industrialisation. So while Victorian men's dress codes were seen to be relatively static and uniform, although that wasn't entirely true, but that was the perception, women's clothes were constantly changing in line with technological developments and advances in the rights for women. So the drawings in Punch revealed what Victorian men and society in general thought about the shifting appearance and position of women. As the visual record of the period, Punch provides that window into Victorian opinions on fashionable dress as it changed, as well as revealing male anxieties over gender roles, class, morality, etiquette, and the rapidly changing world. A side note, this cartoon on the right, which is the title image for Christina Walkley's book, is set just 12 miles away from AUB. A young woman in Bloomer dress is asking a Dorset local for directions to a nearby town of Wareham. And the Dorsetshire native replies, yes, miss, you seem to have them on all right. Yeah, I think you had to be there. But just taking Punch in as a fashion resource into our historic costume students isn't really enough. Punch represents over a century of historical dress. And there's just too much to choose from. Our costume students are really prioritise historicity, historical accuracy. So they need to do some really engaged research by particular years and particular decades. So it had to have a bit of a hook to take it into them. Unfortunately, there was this wonderful series of cartoons published between 1860 and 1870, more or less, produced by the cartoonist Edward Linley Sanborn. They're called the Designs After Nature series, and they all depicted women and the occasional man. We've got the man on the far right there representing the butterfly collar. They're all depicted in dress so elaborate it starts to take the form of animals, including birds, lobsters, snails, whatever you like. These cartoons parody and ridicule some of the most extreme forms of fashionable dress of the period, such as tight-laced corsets and bustle skirts, while also implying that such fashions were outlandish and weird. So they're a fun thing to bring in, but they're also incredibly context-specific to a decade that students might be researching. And in addition to mapping attitudes to the changing styles in women's dress across the Victorian period, these illustrations also documented contemporary attitudes towards the use of animals in fashionable dress. In turning women into birds or crustaceans, Sanborn was making clear how unnatural he found it all. So this layer of focus allowed us to interrogate fashions from a distinct period, while also considering the use of animal products in historic fashion practices. So here is a lovely example of the wasp woman that critiques the 1860s corset, which allowed for extreme tight lacing, really for the first time. The illusion of a small waist prior to that was given through the use of huge crinolines, and the tight lacing of corsets happened in about this period. And this shows us, to the eyes of certain Victorian men, this new fashion was hideous. It bifurcated the body. It made women look insectile. And it reminds students that the critique of corsets was not contemporary to it was contemporary to the time in which they were worn. It was not a modern invention. Here is another example as well. It's one of my favourite illustrations of Sanborn's. This is the lobster, subtitled "A Suggestion for Tight Dresses." It skewers both the hobble skirt and the lobster bustle, which was popular in evening wear in the 1870s, which featured cascading hoops that created a tail-like silhouette, which we can see represented across historical dress artefacts held in museums. So while it was great to bring these in to the students and run a workshop that allowed us to compare some of this satire with real artifacts held in museums, it didn't really take it far enough. And I'm very fortunate in my role that the costume staff are really on board with my nonsense a lot of the time. They loved these illustrations. They made the students laugh. And they wanted to take it that one step further. What else can we do with this? How can we embody this? Maybe we should recreate some of these garments as well. So they became the perfect material for creative reinterpretation. So here she is. This is the lobster, reimagined. Isn't she gorgeous? So this was designed by our costume student Maddie Dyer, and is an extremely beautiful garment, and it's enormous as well. It's designed for a very tall model. So what I loved so much about the way this project went is it encouraged this engagement with the historicity of these fashions at the time. It wasn't just let's look at these illustrations and aren't they silly? It's like how does this satire reflect how Victorian dress was embodied? How does it feel to wear a tight skirt? Do you feel like a lobster? How does it feel a tight corset? Do you feel bifurcated like a wasp? Here's another by Gabriella Venus. This design parodies excess for its own sake. The butterfly motif was everywhere in Victorian ball fashions. Brooches and hairpins were set en ton blanc, so on a spring, so it kind of shimmered and moved like it was a real insect. I should add as well, our reinterpretations were also environmentally conscious. So every costume was made using remnant fabrics, upcycled materials, reclaimed trims to make sure that these beautiful garments were historically aware, and the students who were engaging with fashion were responding to it critically. And that really matters because of what happened to Sanborn after he completed his 1860s, 1870s illustrations. And this intersects with a more serious turn, fashion and animal ethics. Sanborn's satire gradually evolved. By the 1890s, he was criticising quite visibly the use of animal products in dress, particularly the feather trade, which drove many bird species to the brink of extinction. So these two illustrations here show women becoming pretty monstrous hunters when they are looking for feathers to adorn themselves. Feathers were hugely popular in Victorian fashion. Feathers adorned hats, parasols, muffs and fans. Egret feathers were at one point worth more than their weight in gold. The backlash led to the founding of the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, an organisation that still exists today. And it was an organisation that Sanborn himself joined in 1892. So we were able to use this to help students confront the ecological impact of historic fashion. So it wasn't just about what people wore, but what was killed to make it as well. I would like to turn this over to Victoria now, who will show you how the AUB Costume Archive contains physical evidence that complemented the study of all these themes. Take it away, Victoria.
So we're very lucky at AUB to support our students' research. We have an on-site costume archive filled with over 1,000 different artifacts of costume significance. So the earliest garment we have is a 1780s mantua, and we go right the way up to the 1990s. I think we've got a Bruce Oldfield three-piece suit. Got corsets, tailcoats, hats, kimonos, chemises, everything you could think of, and all of it's part of our handling collection. So we use it to help teach our students. They can sort of understand period accurate making techniques, design details, finishings, and then with a little bit of guidance from tutors, that's how they brought these costumes to life. So what you see here is a 1900s bodice. I think it's been turned into a costume later in life with this mesh front, but it's really useful in showing our students, sort of grounding them into that these items were actually worn historically. This one in particular has got some quite gnarly bloodstains under the arm from where the bones have poked through. So it's really useful to help sort of ground our students and teach them and give us nice things to play with when we're trying to do something like this.
Lovely. So we'd had a wonderful time. We'd done this great workshop. We'd introduced the students to this wonderful old material. We'd pulled things out of the costume archive. So it was really historically informed. And we've got these incredible costumes out of it. What now? How could we keep the ball rolling? So not worth just leaving there. We resolved to put together an exhibition of these costumes in the library space. So here they are. So we exhibited them alongside the original illustrations that inspired them, because again, Punch being not very rare or sort of monetarily valuable, I had absolutely no qualms about just putting it on a podium and leaving it loose in the library. We titled the exhibition Strange Nature, Costumes Inspired by Punch magazine, and it's centered around these three costumes, the butterfly, the wasp, and the lobster. So alongside the original material from Punch, which we extended and complemented with historical artifacts from the costume archive. So really, really sort of emphasizing the historical accuracy of these perhaps slightly bizarre pantomime style costumes. Here's another view. There's the lobster there, so you can see how big she is. I really love that Maddie designed this for a plus size figure. So again, she was surfacing something that often gets really obfuscated within historical dress research, that people of all sizes existed at all points in history, but you tend to see very small garments represented in fashion archives. So Maddie was doing some wonderful work there as well, expanding the narrative. In addition to that, we also exhibited these two tiny mini bustles produced by one of our costume academics, Mandy Barrington. These are, they're really lovely. Mandy's about to publish a book on the history of underpinnings like corsets and crinolines and bustles. So we're able to include her examples of the lobster bustle, which is on the left. Is it? Yeah, there's the lobster bustle on the left, and another bustle type from the second bustle period in the 1870s, which Sanborn who's parodied as looking like a snail shell. So again, it's just about adding in that historical context. And then in addition to that, we also included many garments from the costume archive. These were kept in glass cases in the library, which were fortunately already there. We normally use them for artist books. And Victoria very carefully selected pieces that embodied the themes we were exploring, made from animal products. Do you want to tell them about it, Victoria?
Yeah, so we did look at quite a few different objects that could support the exhibition. I think we started off with the fur box that was sort of tucked away in the back of the archive where students forget about things. We looked at some mink stoles. We had a monkey tail cape, this double-ended fox monstrosity to go around the neck. And it was when we sort of looked at this slightly squashed taxidermied fox head, we realised that they should probably be approached with some sensitivity. We are, after all, an arts university and we didn't want to start a protest. So we vetoed the slightly graphic fox stole, instead looked at some more tasteful objects that used animal products in their creation. So we settled on items like the whaleboned corset, a sealskin top hat, 18th century silk shoes, and a marabou feather pillbox hat. What you can see here was part of the feather display. A lot of our items came with headwear. So here on the left, you've got a butterfly hat pin that had some hand painted and dyed feathers to make it look like a butterfly. And it's so delicate, it sort of moved with the wind as well. On the other side here, I think that's some more marabou feathers. We also had a 19th century Victorian bonnet to sit by that as well, next to the pillbox hat too. Or our silk cabinet. So real good. So this is our silk cabinet. We had 3 bodices in here, 1860s, 1870s and 1900s, all showing sort of the range of finishes that a lady could go for in her dress. So we had some day wear, some walking bodices, and then that leery black and red bodice as well for evening wear. We also had some silk pods and some strands of artificial silk as well. They were donated by MODIP, the Museum of Design and Plastic that we also have on campus. And this was patented in 1894, so it sort of gives a different perspective, I think, on artificial fabrics to students. That was certainly something that sort of changed my own perspective, so it was really interesting to discuss with students as well.
Thanks, Victoria. I just want to highlight this illustration as well before I move on, because this was something that was really unexpected when I was looking through all these volumes of Punch, that there was critique about excessive use of silk. Like, you understand feathers and fur, but silk, of course, has an animal cost to it. But it seems astonishing to me that that was recognised in the 1870s. So if you look closely at the illustration, this woman's hair is turning into a silkworm. So, to close out, we didn't just want to come here today to show off about our exhibition, although that was the main reason we wanted to come here today. we want to share a bit about what we learned and offer some actionable tips about how you yourselves could go off, and if you've got punch sitting there in a cupboard or something else that's similar that is just not getting the use out of it, how you could do something similar, and whether you've got something like that in the attic or not. So here is our 6-point plan for how to brush off the dust. I think a lot of these themes have been discussed elsewhere at the conference, but it's always just good to go over them again and formalise them, yeah? So number one, seek unexpected alignments. And I think this was absolutely key to our project. We couldn't assume that an archives primary audience would be the only people interested, and that was the lesson that was immediately apparent when the BA illustration course was like, no, I don't want this. This isn't interesting. Punch would be the most obviously aligned to them. It is where the word cartoon comes from. So you would think people involved with graphic novels and that kind of illustration and cartoon writing would be interested in the history of that. But it's not aligned to their teaching. It's not what they're doing. So you can't force it. So illustration said no, and it does stand to reason that if a department isn't actively teaching, they're not going to engage. So we found that through surprising connections, print culture could inspire costume designs, and it was just about bringing those to the fore and placing them under the noses of the students, and they took it from there. Number two, find the transformative potential. Looking for ways that a collection could inspire reinterpretation rather than just study was really the key to cracking all of this open. If a collection can take central stage in a workshop, it provides students with a really different angle about how to approach the topic, and they start to receive it in new ways. So in our case, Punch's satirical cartoons became a foundation for costume design, turning static illustrations into wearable responses. Number three is super obvious, and we're all doing it. Make it hands-on, make it as hands-on as possible. Allowing physical interaction wherever possible was really, really valuable. And again, because Punch isn't that rare, I didn't mind the students pouring at it, picking it up, didn't make them wear gloves, did make them wash the chocolate off their hands, but there was no risk really to them engaging with it in that way, and it really, really enriched what they were doing. And even when such material is available online, Punch is mostly out of copyright and has been widely digitized. You can find it on the Internet Archive. It's available through Happy Trust. It doesn't offer the same experience engaging with it in that way. You need that sort of sensory and contextual experience that digital copies can't replicate. With something like Punch, the print quality, the age of the paper, that tactile experience of handling old volumes really provided that immediate connection to the past. And as they were imagining these women from the 1870s and how they embodied the world and how they lived, it provided that very quick, tangible connection. Number four, reframe and expand the narrative. If a collection seems outdated, and Punch certainly seems outdated, as we ably demonstrated earlier, it's not funny anymore. Reposition it within contemporary discussions. Connect historical materials to contemporary issues. Encourage students and researchers to interrogate the collection with modern and critical eyes rather than just admire it. So our Punch project connected Victorian satire to very modern and important conversations about sustainability and ethics of using animal materials in dress. Number five is to let the students and researchers take the lead. I just envisioned a workshop. I was like, let's do this. We'll get the collection out. It's going to be cool. And then it just snowballed from there. And then suddenly I was dealing with huge 3D costumes in an exhibition in the library. And that was all thanks to the students and the costume staff taking my idea and just letting it build. So supporting open-ended inquiry was really what led to the most innovative outcome. And lastly, bring it to a wider audience. That might be you. Ensure that discoveries don't end with a single project or workshop. So recording processes, publishing findings, creating toolkits, anything to inspire other colleagues or other libraries. And that element of public engagement through exhibitions or talks or online platforms really helps validate rediscovery efforts. And what I needed it to do was to build institutional support for future projects. So doing something like this right the way through to the exhibition in the library will ensure that other people on campus, even outside the costume department, remember that Punch exists. They'll go like a couple of years down the line, go, oh yeah, what was that thing in the library with that giant lobster? Like, remember, that was Punch. It's much less likely to be shoved back in the stacks again, and it's the main reason why we wanted to bring the record of this project here to you today. Thank you very much.